All right, we have a great panel here today. Thank you for the introduction. I think we can just jump into the questions. But each one here is an amazing human who have done so much in their own world. Laura here have raised over 100 million and helped raising in ICOs. Ariana, I like to read what her mission is. She's an impact analyst at Consensus, research, crafts, use cases, and consults public, private, and nonprofits on how to utilize blockchain to create a more equitable and sustainable world, which I think something is amazing. Salma, we all know her, and I've met her in San Francisco. She was a co-founder of an incubator program called PitMe. It was a life-changing experience, so thank you, Salma. And we have Mazen, who has been on one of the Africa's most prominent entrepreneur 2014 by Forbes.com, and he created the district, and currently he works in software group. So the first question is for the entire panel. What's the status of blockchain applications in emerging market today? Do you know of any specific projects? Yeah, any specific projects that you're aware of, that you admire in emerging markets for blockchain apps? Anyone?
So part of starting the journey of Vested Summit, of course, we had a lot of startups apply, and also the past 2 years have been very enlightening in finding a lot of companies in different parts of the world, not just Egypt, but there's a very, very interesting startup called Tycoon, and it was actually built by a Syrian refugee, and he was not able to be with us today because he actually does not have documents to be able to travel. But basically, he's using blockchain to create identity on blockchain, on the cloud, on the blockchain network, and be able to provide services for the underserved and specifically for refugees and immigrants. And the other one, another really interesting company was also a company that is that has realized that sometimes the business model of the unicorns, especially Uber and Careem and some companies that are in the ride-sharing space, basically are causing more damage to drivers and the consumers, and the people are actually locked in this behavior of driving, and the average person is not meant to drive 12 hours a day to be able to earn a living, and it's actually very bad for the driver himself. So although it's a really good opportunity to offer someone a job, but basically it's really bad for the driver himself. And so they're basically trying to use blockchain to offer new transportation solutions, and they're officially launching with us at Vested here, so check RedCab out. They're also our official transport for the summit.
I would say the most notable application that's been deployed into the field in the development space is the World Food Programme's Building Blocks project. It was actually the initial pilot was in Afghanistan, and then they're fully using it and looking to scale up in Jordan in a refugee camp, but they're using iris scans actually for their cash-based transfer system. So the World Food Programme not only gives out physical food and food packets, but they also do cash-based transfers, and so they'll allow people actually to just use the cash how they feel best. And in terms of recording when and how a refugee is using their cash within the camp, they've started to use blockchain, and so the program is called Building Blocks. It was actually the first article I read when I was exploring blockchain that was my aha moment of, oh, this isn't just like a fintech thing. It's not just something to raise a bunch of money through ICOs or these kinds of different areas, but like it has an actual humanitarian use case. And so the way it works, this program works from the extent of information that's online, is that when they go, when a refugee goes to purchase something at a supermarket, rather than giving a payment card or signing something, they literally just scan like their eyes, their irises, which is attached to their identity within the World Food Program, and it also is attached to their bank account. And so blockchain being a ledger, which just records transactions, that transaction is actually recorded using their biometric data. So that's, I would say, there aren't many that are in full force in the field just yet. There's a lot that are being thought about and ideated upon, but those in the development and humanitarian space, we're a bit more cautious deploying things rapidly. We want to make sure we're doing it correctly, and so that takes a lot of time to build up too, which I think is why you're not seeing as many consumer-facing development projects as you are in other industries.
Thank you. Backing up, who here knows about the blockchain? Nice. Who doesn't know about the blockchain? Nice. Okay, so for those who are in between and those who don't know, Ariana has delivered a training for United Nations about what the blockchain is, and I'd like to ask her about what's your definition, how do you define the blockchain?
Very simplistically, it's a digital ledger. So a ledger being, what accountants use, what bankers use, just to say, I have this, you have this, at this day, this time, this location. Everything in our world is about transacting, right? Like it's about ownership, it's about who was where when, or what product was where when. It's all about just storing the movement of things and the ownership of things. And so blockchain, while yes, it is, a technology, really at its core, it's just a ledger that stores a transaction, the record of a transaction, and in certain versions of it, it's public, so anyone who's on the network can see it, so it holds people accountable. And it's also distributed, which means that rather than having like a central database on a single computer, or a single building that has all of the paper records. A computer could get hacked, a building with paper records could be burned down, or the papers could be stolen and thrown away or hidden, which would erase that record of transactions. But with blockchain, it's actually stored on every computer that's on the specific network. So you would have to break down and hack all of the computers on the network, or a majority depending upon the consensus mechanism, which is very technical, to get into the records. So it's a more secure, more transparent way of recording transactions. And you were like, well, how does it look like an application, or how does it turn into Bitcoin and these different kinds of things? But it's a back-end system, so it can simply just be like a database software, or it can actually be an operating system that you can run depending upon the blockchain programs on top of.
Thank you. My question is to Mazen. Mazen, you're involved with the Fintech, financial technologies. I would like to know more about the status of financial technologies in Egypt, and also if you heard of specifically blockchain-related work that we're doing in Egypt.
Okay, so basically I have been for the last 3 years, I have been working in the fintech sphere, mostly with microfinance, all this, the financial inclusion mission. Now it's becoming very important strategies for different governments. So as we work in Egypt, we work in many countries in Africa and the Middle East. So we are having projects from Mauritania to Pakistan, and from all North Africa up to Nigeria. We work mostly with financial institutions. We start seeing a little bit financial institution, they want to apply blockchain technology as their back end, more secure infrastructure or environment. Still, it's you're having regulators that has been all of that challenge with financial innovations, because the technology itself, it moves much faster than the regulators that you can catch up with. One of the very cool projects that I have been witnessing in Nigeria, for example, it's there's this blockchain technology company, it's called Cora, and basically what they are doing, they are connecting farmers who works in the field and they are operating kind of cooperatives, and then you're having the end user or the banks or the financial institution the distribution, it's a little bit like complicated, like, but the whole thing of customer acquisition, it happens through on the field, like through this technology. That's like the funnel of acquiring the customer and the customer data with very low cost and very low fees, and at the same time like using like the feature phone, like the very old technology like Nokia phone, to distribute back their money. So instead of that the farmers themselves, they can go and commute from their village to the main city to get their money. The money goes directly into their mobile wallet without all the need of commuting. So the main application, as you have explained, of blockchain is really reducing the middleman. So in financial transaction, it's all about like when you're doing like any transaction, you're having like many institutions in the cycle. Everyone takes a little bit of fees or commission, so it ends up very costly from a business standpoint. So once you are doing like this decentralization of transaction, like the whole cost, it goes down up to almost like zero. And now, for example, like we are involved in a project with MasterCard and Visa, and that's like the first ever collaboration happening between like these two payment scheme. It's in Peru. And what they are trying to do, we are using blockchain technology as well to initiate like money transaction platform with almost like zero fees and commission on it. So when we are talking about like the bottom of the pyramid, like people who really need the financial services. For example, in Egypt, if you are giving someone like a loan or a credit of $10 with a conventional banking system, it will there will be another like 20% as commission and fees charged on it. But with such technology now, it gets like a little bit like much less. Like it gets almost as zero. And so back to the whole example of Nigeria, for example, like from the agriculture, the agribusiness, we feel that like in many cities and in many villages, they're facing like poverty in terms of like hunger and stuff like that. But like the whole point is not about like hunger. I think like globally, our production of vegetables and crops is actually double our consumption. So like if we're, I think like the ratio was like we are producing around like 7 billion tons of like agricultural crops, and what we are actually using is only like 3 billions. The whole issue now and the whole challenge is not the production, but is the fairness of distribution. And the more you are having like a centralized entities, like that's the middleman as well, they play like a very important role like from a macroeconomical standpoint to redirect the resources to the way that's like more beneficial to them. But like with more like decentralized, the decentralized like technology on one aspect, the data is more secured, is more decentralized, and the communication that can happen between like both extreme or both ends of the supply chain, it's getting like more direct. So like it reduces like so much like all the middlemen. Hope that clarified a little bit. It's a little bit complicated, like the whole technology, it's still new. Financial institution, like we work now like on a project that at this stage, like it's in Egypt, like one financial institution, like they want to use a more like centralized, not centralized, but like a private blockchain environment for their transaction in a way to add actually like more security and encryption on their transactions. So surprisingly, one of the things is just it's a global ratio. For example, each financial institution or like normally banks now, each day they are getting a threat of an average like 12 ransomware. If you don't know like what's ransomware, like it's kind of like a virus that goes to the database of the financial institution. It blocks the access to this data. It doesn't use the data. It just like blocks the access to the data and asks the banks to pay, for example, like $300 to release the data again. It's a very small fee, $300, but you can see like that's the whole risk of having like a decentralized thing. And normally the attackers, they are very smart because like they charge only $300 because like if they charge more, the bank will invest more in securities in another layer of firewalls and so on.
My next question is to Laura. And I was in Santa Monica and I met Akon, the rapper.
He's in blockchain.
No, yeah?
He's getting into,
Okay, can you sing a little bit of Akon's song? Okay, I will. Smack that all on the floor. Smack that. So that's Akon for those who who doesn't remember him. And Akon was actually before that, which I'm really interested also knowing. He was working in bringing electricity to Africa and deploying stations and having some work. And this was like, I don't know, 4 years ago. And Laura told me about a story from her home country that's related to this, using blockchain to handle power distribution. Can you tell us more about this case study and like what do you know about it, and maybe what's the possibilities for other countries, similar to this?
Sure. So there is one company back at home, Lithuania, where I'm from, who decided to go into green energy industry, and they realized there is no platform, nothing for trading green energy. For example, you live, I don't know, somewhere where it's super windy, or you have a lot of sun, like in Egypt, you have tons of sun. Why don't you create a small solar like battery which would collect all the sunshine, and then sell it to other people? But there is literally nothing there. So the company called WePower, I helped them a little bit with marketing and PR. They raised 40 million. There was already a successful ICO, and they actually create this platform. And what their next basically goal is to expand in all of these countries where they have alternative energy, not the nuclear power, which we all know it's not going to be the good solution for, let's say, next 10 or 20 years, but we can go back to more alternative ways, and then of course everyone can make money. So I believe that these types of blockchain related projects are just how my fellow panelists talked about, are the ones who are actually making the impact, who are actually doing something better for everyone. Even though I helped a lot of companies who were more about the money raise their capital, I still personally believe the projects who are trying somehow even a little bit influence the society they're surrounding to kind of involve or do something better is the ones we should all here in the audience actually support and encourage. And yeah, I think if we could do all of that, then maybe the world will actually be a better place, as much as it sounds funny.
Thank you. My question is to Salma, and you've been living in San Francisco for a while, and some people would argue that we can't just bring any technologies and try to apply it in emerging markets or specifically in Egypt, and maybe there is a transition period, and so how could we develop a sense of what can we take as technology? And now specifically talking about blockchain, how can we tell if this technology actually will be helpful for us in Egypt or maybe emerging markets, or if it's just something that a buzzword that everyone is talking about and trying to get into?
Absolutely. I think that the era of actually trying to take something that is working elsewhere and basically just reapply it in another market is just something from the past. It's really, really important to design with the people and have grassroots entrepreneurs be able to build things that are actually solving real world problems on the ground with the people themselves, and then be able to identify if this actually is a global phenomenon as well, and how to reapply that and be able to scale it. And with blockchain particularly, there's a specific application of blockchain that I'm personally excited in, and we are in the company at Scale Up Ventures interested to experiment with as a direction. It's basically how to redistribute wealth using blockchain, and also how to help startups fundraise using blockchain in the crowd. And this exists already today. So there are a lot of ICOs, which are initial coin offerings. Just for the audience who do not know what an ICO is, basically when a company goes public, it's called an IPO, and this is when it basically can trade ownership of its stock to public and the crowd. But before that, anybody who wants to invest in a company has to be an official investor, an accredited investor, and in some markets has to be an angel or an investor. But because this requires a lot of business intelligence on the business model, the technology, and how this works, and also because the businesses are very risky at the super early stage, so it requires a specific kind of knowledge for people, for the average person to be able to invest in that. I think that this is why ICOs today, when we gave that power to the crowd, it's misused, it's used, as Ariana mentioned actually yesterday in the workshop, as a way to retrade and reinvest instead of actually using it to using it in and by itself as a currency, as a digital currency. So we are excited to experiment with crowd investing, and the Unconscious booth outside, which Shireen will be talking about tomorrow extensively, has a vision to integrate blockchain to actually turn this into a crowd investing platform where average Mohamed or average Joe can have the same intelligence that an angel or a VC investor can actually have today to invest in any company.
Just can I say something on
Please.
ICOs? So one thing I would, we talk about in this space with ICOs, like ICOs, initial coin offerings, again, a company will just release tokens for its system and you can buy them. And there are, there are tokens and there are companies that are legitimate, and you probably have heard about a lot of companies that will raise a lot of money and then will run away with the money and produce no product, and their investors, demand their money back, but because it's not regulated by any financial institution, there's no way to get their money back. So, one thing we always advise people is if you are going to invest in ICO, if you're going to buy tokens, which you can think of as shares, like securities, is what we call them in the States, is do your homework and understand, if the company actually, if it really is using blockchain for a good reason, or if it's just saying blockchain because it is a hot topic and because it's a buzzy word. And always invest responsibly. Don't put your whole life savings into something like this just yet. But do beware. Right now I think we have an issue because blockchain is really cool because anyone can start building on it because it's open source. A lot of the code is open source, on GitHub if you're a developer. Anyone can launch a blockchain business and can launch an ICO, and it's amazing for small entrepreneurs who don't have to go through the traditional investment mechanisms. However, that doesn't mean that every company is going to be perfect or every product is actually going to get delivered. As an investor, if you're looking to invest, actually, read the white paper, which is, what describes the technology of the platform. Make sure, vet it, and then also make sure that, you're not just buying into an idea, that there is going to be something that will follow that's tangible if, they're trying to sell a product. So just some advice.
Okay, so Laura, tell us, commenting on ICOs, possibilities and what risks are there, and how can you mitigate those risks and possibilities?
I totally agree with girls are saying that there are a lot of ICOs who just run away from money, who are scamming people, but then it comes down actually to us, let's say potential investors, when investment can be at $10, $20, doesn't have to be like thousands or hundreds of thousands, to actually do the research, but not only the research in terms of white paper, but in terms of the community, because usually all the companies who are raising money to ICO, they have their Telegram channel, they have their social media, where they're actually putting a lot of effort to have this communication with their community and ask their questions, ask what is the reason they're doing this product? What are their long-term, short-term goals when they raise the money? What they're gonna do if they're not gonna raise the money? Will they come back to their old jobs, or will they try to raise money, let's say, through other ways? And the other thing which I would really like to mention, especially for the audience here, is not about how to invest in ICOs, but actually how to start it and how to actually decide to raise money alternatively. Because what would you do if you would like to start a company? You would, of course, try to go to VCs, to angel investors, which might take some time, which might be a bit tricky to you, and you might even live in a smaller city where you can't really reach those people. So there is always an alternative to, of course, if you have an internet, ask the crowd anywhere in the world. So basically have 7 billion potential investors to actually help you with a project. And it's actually relatively easy to start your own idea. Of course, if the idea needs a blockchain, as you already explained a little bit, just create a website, find one developer online who knows how to do anything related to blockchain, and then just tell everything what you want to do, your actual, I would say, future plans, your business model to all your community, anyone on the internet, social media. There are forums, there is Reddit, where actually people in this community hang out. And that's actually a really good way to raise not only big amounts of money, but I met a lot of really cool entrepreneurs. Usually they're like young kids, like 16, 17, who raised, let's say, $10,000, who raised $20,000. Not about like millions or even like billions, because there are some ICO unicorns already. So maybe you can raise 10, 20,000 for your small idea, which of course requires a token as well, but then and have this small, let's say, jumpstart in whatever you're doing, and then maybe later, if it works out, you can raise more amount of money. And what I love about blockchain and the whole like ICO is interesting that actually allows to do that compared to maybe other industries where it's a little bit tricky to kind of find that first step, that first person, like investor who's actually going to believe in you.
Thank you. I'd like to take one question from the audience. We only have room for one question. Anyone who wants to ask a question? Okay.
Thank you so much for all the panelists on this very enlightening conversation. I wanted to ask the Egyptians, maybe Salma, in the context in Egypt, is it possible to do an ICO in Egypt for people who are interested in following the advice of Laura? What's the current situation in Egypt?
Yeah, so actually there is one Egyptian company that is working on an ICO currently, and I've heard a number of other companies as well. You're gonna hear some news soon that someone launched an ICO and it's the first ICO in Egypt, maybe with the Invested Summit, maybe afterwards. So the short answer is yes, it's possible for anyone around the world, and this is basically why this is a phenomenon. I mean, people from anywhere can just put up a white paper and go through the process and be able to raise money from the crowd, and even money in ideas. It doesn't even need to have, you just need to have the product roadmap, the vision, and some other details, of course, that you need to craft very carefully. So, of course, you have to have a very solid team, a very solid product, and other things to be able to do that today. But I think that the intelligence of raising ICO is what's missing in the Egyptian market, and that's why you are not finding that many people that are actually trying to go after this. So here are the experts, so get their thoughts.
I had a quick follow-up question, if it's possible. It was my understanding that Egyptians couldn't, for example, buy Bitcoin. So on the cryptocurrency side, this was unregulated, unknown, there's this gray area, and it was not possible. So you're saying there's a difference between ICOs and then getting involved with cryptocurrency exchanges and things like that, is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So when you actually buy ICO, you don't buy equity in a company, you buy a token, and digital token sits on Ethereum or on blockchain. So you do not need to, like, you're not buying stake, you're not selling stake in the company, you're just selling a utility token in the company. So that's completely different, and it has nothing to do with the infrastructure of the legal business that we have today. That's what's powerful about the blockchain, is that it's basically literally an internet system that is governed by no one but the blockchain itself and the people that are actually trying to help connect and make this change happen and decentralize things.
Yeah, so a utility token, and I covered this a little bit yesterday, but the difference between like a security token, which is like buying a stake in a company, right, where this is an ICO that says like, buy my token, you'll become a millionaire overnight because it'll be worth so much money, that kind of thing. But there isn't an inherent value to using the token, right? Like you just have it and it just sits in your crypto wallet and you don't do anything with it. That you can think of that as a security token. And a utility token is one that says, I'm starting a company and I'm starting a marketplace, and to buy products in my decentralized marketplace, you must have an Ariana token, or else you can't buy anything. So you need an Ariana token to use the marketplace. So that's like there's inherent utility in that token. So that's, again, when you're starting to look at those kinds of differences when you're reading white papers, like what is the use of the token? Why are they using a token? Like it's a good way to raise money, right? But also, will you use it after, or will it just kind of sit? So that's like a very simplified difference between like what she was saying of like a security versus utility. But yeah, the banning of cryptocurrencies, it depends on the platform. Some, like in the States, some ICOs that are states-based, you actually do have to buy them with a cryptocurrency. So I could see where that could get complicated. If you can't even buy a cryptocurrency here, you wouldn't be able to buy a token. But you can, use different payment methods for ICOs. But like for a lot of ICOs, you have to buy them with Bitcoin or with Ether. So if you can't buy them here, that may make it tricky. But I bet some of our coder friends can, talk about VPNs and things and Tor browsers.
Thank you so much. Shout outs to the amazing panel, but also to the great startups that's working from Egypt in blockchain technologies like La Marcas with Noor. I think he's somewhere over there. Yeah. And also Amr Saleh, I don't think he's here, but also working in blockchain and IoT and Internet of Things, and also Taikin, who's within our region. So shout outs for all those amazing heroes. And there's a possibility as well of learning to code and create blockchain applications. You can speak to Noor. You can also speak to Ariana, who's also offering, like Consensus is offering like 100 scholarship to learn about blockchain development. I read that online somewhere. So the conversation could still go. Thank you so much for everyone here for your amazing time, and thank you, and keep the conversation going. Bye-bye.